Have a seat. So first of all, welcome. Welcome back to the beginning of our program year. It's great to see you all. I want to talk about a little bit of a serious subject today, and we can hear some voices from our children as well on this. We're happy to have them here this week with us here in the church service. So 15 years ago today, so who here was born less than 15 years ago? Raise your hand. Okay, so for the young people, they won't remember this, but everybody else will. So many of us at this hour were glued to live TV, and we were watching the events unfold in New York City, in Washington, D.C., and over the fields of Pennsylvania. We refer to this as 9/11. And by that we mean September 11th, 2001, 15 years ago, the day we experienced for the first time an attack on U.S. soil since the War of 1812. It changed us. It changed the way we understand being safe. It changed the way we do our business with each other and the way we interact with the world. It was such a turning point in our lives. We love to tell the stories just for the comfort of it, of where we were and how we experienced that day. And we try to remember what life was like before that. When you go to an airport, can you remember what it was like before 9/11? It was a lot easier. It raised for us so many issues in this country around safety and security. Now, for so long, our country had been shielded from that kind of conflict and violence, but many millions around the globe on other continents had experienced that kind of violence. We were just not familiar with it. But since 9/11, we've joined the community of nations who can feel under threat and who have heightened fears and who take the task of defending themselves very seriously. So the front cover of the September issue of the Atlantic magazine just arrived this week, and it has this title. Since 9/11, the United States has spent $1 trillion to protect the homeland. The new security state is vast and growing. Are we safer? And that's a good question. Since 9/11, there have been incredible advances in technology which have made the world smaller and made no person or geographical area unreachable and have aided in the tracking of all human activity. Individuals now, or movements, businesses, or governments can keep track of what's going on in their spheres of influence. And this is all designed to keep us safe. Never mind who the us is that is kept safe, or what safety means to different individuals, movements, or groups. ISIS would tell its members that they are trying to make the world safe. And technology has come to you, my friends, the private citizen. Now as well, you are able to keep you, yourself, and your home and your family safe. Did you know that now there's this product on the market that provides a camera in your doorbell on the front porch connected to your cell phone so that when a stranger approaches or is prowling and rings the bell, you can, through your cell phone, no matter where you are in the world, answer with your voice as if you were inside the house and thus avert a break-in. The technology is intended to keep you and your possessions safe. But of course, it depends on your having a cell phone that's charged and coverage from your provider, wherever you happen to be. So even the safety of a camera doorbell with a voice response feature cannot ensure perfect safety. While some situations are safer than others, none of us is ever entirely safe, are we? but we spend our lives acting out our fear for our safety. Well, what kind of life is that? So I ask you to consider, what makes you safe? So let's hear from our children for a minute. So, or our young people. Sam or Kate, what makes you safe? A locked door, yeah. A big dog. Audrey, what makes you safe? Not sure, huh? Having mom and dad next to you? Yeah. I wonder if constant reminders and special programs about safety and security make us any safer. I have a funny story to tell you. They're about safety concerns. There was this company, and it was trying to continue its perfect record for 5 years, its perfect safety record. And so it decided to show the people in the firm a film that was related to wearing safety goggles on the job to try to keep its record perfect, right? So they got all their employees together and they showed this film, and the film was so graphic about accidents in the workplace that 25 workers got injured while everybody was rushing to the door to get out of the screening room. And 13 others fainted in the screening room, and one man required 7 stitches because he cut his head falling off a chair while watching the film. They got really invested in their safety record, didn't they? So I do wonder, what makes us safe? I know for me, I consider the privilege of living in a country with the resources to use sophisticated technology to monitor activity that might prove to be dangerous. I consider the privilege of our wealth that allows us to equip our homes or our businesses with strong doors or security systems around every door and window, or even our life that gives us the chance to live in gated communities with guards, or to drive cars that make exceedingly loud and annoying noises when any stranger comes near. But even with all of these things that we've designed for our safety and security, do you feel any safer? Do you feel any safer? That's a little bit of a different question. So let me think of it this way. We all know the wealthy person who wants to tell you that they're barely able to pay the bills, right? So I once heard of this couple who was divorcing, and the husband had convinced his lawyer that he was going to end up in a breadline, until the lawyer actually looked at this husband's finances and realized that the husband had some irrational fears. He was sitting on millions of dollars and would never be in that breadline that he liked to talk about. But that husband felt financially threatened. His fears had overwhelmed him, and he couldn't think straight. So I wonder if our fears for our safety have overwhelmed us in the same way that husband's fears had overwhelmed him. I mean, the statistics say that we may be very safe. In fact, we are plenty safe enough if you consider the likelihood of our having a terrorist attack. But we may still not feel safe. So I would submit to you that ultimately our safety and our feeling about our safety comes not from any outer sort of circumstance or physical strategy, not from a government program or technological advances. Not surprisingly, here we are in church, and thinking theologically, I would say our safety comes from God. In the Old Testament lesson from Jeremiah, we heard the words of condemnation and judgment. God accusing God's people of being utterly foolish, acting with complete lack of wisdom, pursuing evil ways by not turning to God and putting God first in their lives. In fact, the words God spoke through his prophet Jeremiah are biting and sarcastic, accusing them, his people, of being very practiced at doing evil and utterly clueless about how to do good. It does make me wonder about us in our pursuit of worldly safety and security, whether we are not at least at times foolish or lacking in wisdom and clueless. At some point, have we allowed our fears to overwhelm us? Have we allowed the threats from others to make us so scared that we abandon our sanity and goodness in favor of a life of mere safety from harm? Is that the life we want to live? A life that is just safe from harm? We of all people in the church have been given a different way. The shadow that death casts over the valley does not have to reduce us to debilitating fear of evil on our pathway through life. But we do need to have the courage to keep walking and to stay on the path and to remain free from fear. Now, some of you have seen that bumper sticker in my office. I'm going to hold it up. You won't be able to read it, so I'll read it to you. It says, "I do not intend to tiptoe through life only to arrive safely at death." And that about sums it up for me. I think we are called to walk with God first and foremost, to put God first, and to let our safety come from God, to trust God and trust the journey. And I think we need to keep practicing that together. The world would tell us something different. We need to cultivate with each other resisting fear and believing in another kind of safety that does not depend on worldly circumstances, for we really can't control those anyway, but takes the 40,000-foot view of our circumstance. We need to cultivate together a belief that God's hand is at work in our lives for a higher kind of safety than the strategies of governments or technologies or anything else. We are not going to change the challenges in our world. They are very real, and we have to address the safety and security issues that we face. Those to whom Jeremiah railed could not change that the Babylonians, even as he was speaking with them, were gathering their troops and coming to overwhelm them. That, in fact, they could not change that they were going to be defeated and then gathered up and taken as slaves to work on the banks of the Euphrates. But God's final word of judgment was not that they were left to their own devices or to the security in the hands of others. The God's judgment really came as a voice of reconciliation, a word of restoration and hope. At the end of Jeremiah's book, God speaks anew and says, "I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. And I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall they teach one another or say to each other, 'Know the Lord.' For they all shall know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will forgive their iniquity and remember their sin no more." And that great gift, my friends, from our God is the thing that might remind us of where our safety needs to dwell. The great thing about St. John's Church is that we are a community that dares to attempt to practice together knowing the Lord, receiving God's forgiveness and hoping and expecting that the safety that comes with the sheer confidence of God in our life will be enough. God, in Jeremiah, went right up to the precipice to push God's people over into the pit of eternal condemnation, and God looked down and decided to withhold God's anger and give them another chance. And so it is with us also. Again and again, we are given another chance. This is our eternal opportunity. God won't give up on us. 40 years after the Babylonian captivity, the people of God returned to Jerusalem to rebuild. Their captivity had been hard and sad and debilitating, really challenging. But they came to know God in new ways, and that was a great gift to them. My hope is, and perhaps 25 years from now, 40 years after 9/11, we will better understand this period in our history and the threats to our security and safety. And we, by our efforts and suffering, will also know God in new ways that will sustain us and provide for us the safety we seek. I hope together we can walk with God and let our security come from our trust in God's presence among us. Amen.